Right. So, and you can see here I've copied, you know, I gave them questions. I'll talk to you about that later on. And they all kind of, you know, found it really exciting. So, and they rated the experience 4.6, so 4.6. So yeah, so I'll describe a little bit more. Yeah, I'll put the link, you know, to that in the chat later on. So yeah, so you know, these virtual classrooms go for inclusivity. I kind of, you know, we were having computer sessions, you know, computer lab sessions for languages, and I really thought it was pointless. You know, the students were taking their own laptops, you know, to the classroom. Computers were not doing what they were supposed to be doing. And I just thought, you know, if we want to be innovative, we need to move away from these computer lab sessions. And I also wanted to create a low pressure environment because, as the video says, you know, the students very often, many of them feel very self-conscious about speaking in class. We've got little, you know, small seminars where it makes it a little bit easier, but still there are some students that are very confident. Many students are very, you know, not very confident. Basically, they feel very conscious. So I want to see whether the VR in combination with AI really helps them reduce that anxiety of public speaking. Of course, you know, it's multisensory, it's visual, you know, the auditory input, you know, combines, you know, the kinesthetic engagement. So, and that, I believe, you know, improves retention, critical thinking. Then we got real role play or more real role play scenarios where it would allow, you know, students, you know, to explore different perspectives. And of course, you know, I wanted you know, a class VR AI session. So and this was, you know, because the headsets, you know, they could put the headsets on and then just it could be an individual experience. But by transforming or taking these, you know, these scenarios to the data immersion, so you've seen, you know, the room, which is a very nice space full of, you know, screens. Then the students, you know, could cast, you know, you know, well, we casted the, you know, the VR experience onto the screen so other students could see what was going on, and there were also captions, you know, so to what the chatbot was saying. So the students then engage in a class, you know, VR scenario where they were collaborating, they were helping each other, and they were also peer assessing. So how, you know, obviously the experience is, you know, involves quite a lot of preparation. So first of all, it was the scenarios. I teamed up with the innovation team at Lancaster University. So I'm obviously from the discipline of languages and global cultures. And they already had a scenario for an interview that were trying, you know, with other disciplines. And we started off, you know, looking at the learning objectives for other you know, scenarios such as ordering food as well as the job interview and asking for travel information. Then, you know, because we were taking that to the data immersion suite, the room with all the screens, I had to gather supporting materials, videos, vocabulary prompts, assessment checklists that they could peer assess, and, you know, and then manage how to, you know, project all these visual prompts, you know, so it was a really nice immersive experience for the students. So I'm not the technical person here, but I can tell you a little bit about how things were put together. So, you know, to make these scenarios, so sorry, so to make these scenarios authentic, so obviously, you know, a group of language educators like myself, you know, we teamed up with the innovation team, you know, the people who were the technical team, you know, to put together scenarios to create cultural relevant prompts. We tried to tailor these scenarios according to the Common European Framework of References, you know, from level A1, which is a beginner level, to C2, if you know about language levels, you know, which is an advanced level. So students could practice at the right level, but also differentiate levels even within the same class, so they could actually choose the level that was more appropriate to to themselves. And of course, it was, as the video said, we didn't want any scripts. We wanted to flow as a real dialogue would do, really. And so it works basically with the students record a message, which is converted to a speech, to text, and then back to speech after the AI generates a response. And this obviously, helps create a natural flow conversation, given that safe space, for speaking and listening. In that respect. So I don't know whether you saw that. Yeah, there's a little button you record, and then you stop, and then the chatbot is thinking and responding accordingly to what the student has said. The interesting thing about this project is the reports that you get, because one thing is to engage in the scenario, but then the students want to then do something following, that experience, that they could self-evaluate, they could check, how they did. So they do get a detailed feedback, and it covers, a number of things, how they handle the situation, the language use, and it has a full transcript. It also aligns with the Common European Framework of Reference, the levels. It does a vocabulary analysis and even a sentiment analysis to understand tone and how appropriate the response was. This was particularly relevant for the interviews because, how, the tone is appropriate, to certain questions. And that was particularly very useful for students to go back and check, what they said and how the report, evaluated the responses. Now, we also have a web version for the VR scenarios, and this is obviously, this is, you can see, is a web link for ordering food, which students can use. It's not the VR, it's not what the VR looks like. You see, in the video a little bit more what it would look like, when the headsets are on. But it's still a smart scenario that allows the students, to practice from their own devices before and after. The good thing as well about the smart scenarios, they can choose different languages. So when you go to the scenario, they choose a language. We've got, all sorts of, different languages there, from Spanish, French, Italian, Polish, Russian. Then they would choose the level, and then they actually can choose to speak to Kevin, a male, or Carla, a female. And obviously this was, developed to, to create these scenarios, even if, because we felt that maybe some students, would feel a bit funny about putting the headsets on and might feel a bit sick. So we also had, a plan B that they could go on the web link version for it. So a little bit about the background to the study, to this project. So as the video said, I tried this with second-year students learning Spanish. It was a B1, B2 level, so that's intermediate. And from the questionnaires and talking to them, lots of them were familiar with VR, but mostly, I would say, all of them through gaming. And obviously this, because some of them had experience of the headsets, that they seemed to be quite comfortable with them. I worked with 29 students, and because of the data immersion suite being quite a small space and because of the headset being on, we split them into 6 different classes. So it would be small reduced groups for them to engage in a bit more easily, in that space and with the headsets, and to evaluate each other. So we've got another picture there, how it looked in the room. So the feedback was very, very positive, because I tried this, and it was a pilot. Obviously, I had to speak to my colleagues and make a case that it was worth pursuing this year. And it was overwhelmingly positive. The students felt comfortable. There was no dizziness. This was a concern from colleagues that they might feel a bit funny, especially students that might have particular learning needs. Nobody reported any dizziness. They all enjoyed the sessions as highly engaging and immersive. They reported, the experience as has helped them to make real progress and also to feel less, conscious of, of speaking in public, because they felt they were on their own, even though they knew they weren't, because they had somebody sitting next to them. But it was a smaller group as well. It was about only 6 people, 6 students in the group. So yes, a few more, just a few more results from the questionnaire that I sent, to students. So it really, it showed great potential to use further and to embed in our pedagogy. It definitely, most of the students, felt that it reduced their anxiety. It felt like, like gamified practice, and it's very personalized, to a specific student. They can adapt, their level, and obviously the AI responds accordingly to what the student says. And, they all felt that it is that, immersive and multisensory experience, enhance inclusivity of the learning. And yes, I applied for the QS Reimagine Education Awards, and we were quite lucky to be shortlisted. So obviously, this is a great achievement in the project. I don't know whether we've won yet. That will be next week. But it's definitely something that immersive technologies are really, becoming a thing, as a potential pedagogical tool, to develop in our practice. And yeah, so looking ahead, obviously within this context, the project really, is intended to contribute to studies of how VR in combination of AI can help students learn languages and also intercultural skills. And obviously within this context, we can see, on the slide that there are some recent studies which also confirms that VR can reduce physical and attitudinal barriers. It can foster cultural empathy, but there's not so much in the context of foreign language learning as such. There's been there have been a number of research for specific learning contexts, but not for foreign languages or English as a foreign language, for example. So what's next? In terms of, the scenarios, because we've got a limited amount of scenarios. So we are trying to expand and improve the scenarios following the feedback from students. For example, one of the things that the students said is like the chatbot was not blinking, for example, and that was off-putting for 1 or 2 students. They thought it was a bit weird. So there's things like that we can make humanize more the chatbot and work on the scenarios and the current scenarios, but also to expand and create new scenarios that are more cultural and that can develop AI-driven dialogues for this authentic intercultural communication. And obviously, it would be, I'm looking to research the impact on intercultural competence and the development, the proficiency across these levels that I've talked about, the Common European Framework of Reference levels. So that is also, this year we are, we've already run a few sessions for French. So not, that, because everybody felt that it was worth embedding in our pedagogy. So we've had, quite a few VR sessions for French, and we've used other scenarios, not just the one with for the job interview. So we used the scenario at the restaurants, and also the French used a job interview. And then I will be using the rest of the scenarios after Christmas, and I will be including first year students. So it will be A1, so beginners level, intermediate level, to a little bit more advanced level. So I'm going to be trying different levels, more scenarios, and see how that goes in terms of, the development of these scenarios. So now there are some challenges, with this, as you can imagine, and one of the challenges we're encountering now is I'm working with the innovation team, and they are very good at making changes and tweaks, but obviously there's certain things to make things very more technical and, I don't know, much more developed, it needs funding, and also the implementation of this, really, has an impact on the workload of, for staff, involved in the VR project. So it's something that, we're looking at, and hopefully we'll come to a solution, to further develop the pedagogy. And that's it.